had an email from Kay Petrini a couple of weeks ago, and I never shared it with you, and I want to now. It was one of the nights when I was talking about the proposal by the Business Roundtable to raise the Social Security eligibility age to 70. Right? Just the Business Roundtable. Those are people who really don't care. It's all a game to them, right? Anyway, Kay wrote, "Hey, Mike, I was listening to the podcast on my way into work today and wanted to comment on the Business Roundtable's proposal to raise Social Security eligibility age to 70. The overpaid, greedy bastards who come up with these ideas obviously do not understand how hard the average American works every single day. I once worked at J.P. Morgan, so believe me, I know what these fat cats consider to be so-called hard work and the enormous sums of money they get paid for it. Any member of the working or middle class should be outraged at the idea that we should be forced to work 3 more years to access Social Security. Most of us have been paying into the system for decades. In my case, over 3, since I was 16. But yeah, sure, let's tell firefighters that they have to climb ladders and sling hoses for a few more years. And cops, what's the harm in having a 70-year-old chasing after a group of teenagers who just robbed a convenience store? I'm certain the nurses won't mind having to spend an extra 3 years on their already well-worn feet, performing tasks like turning patients over in bed or bolting down the hospital hallway in response to a cold blue. As to teachers, well, this specific issue has been on my mind lately. The other night I said to my husband, I have no earthly idea of how I'm going to do this job for another 19 years. I'll die of exhaustion long before I collect Social Security. And I was only half joking. While my job does not involve the physical labor of other jobs I mentioned, it does involve tremendous effort and expenditure of energy. A teacher can't expect students to be involved and engaged if he or she is not. Now, I don't expect the right-wingers who think that teachers only work from 8 a.m. to 3 p.m. to understand this, but any teacher and anyone who understands the nature of the teaching profession gets it. I'm convinced that the working experience of most Americans parallel my own. We work very hard for modest wages, and if we've been around for any length of time, it's likely that we've spent the majority of our lives on the job. That members of the upper 1%, like these pigs in the Business Roundtable, would dare to suggest that already overworked Americans be forced to keep it up until age 70 is just beyond the pale. It's also proof that unless and until the American people finally wake up and act, the ruling class in this country will continue to prosper at our expense. Okay. Now you can get to some of the pieces that Kay has written. Go to her her website, kaysreportcard.com, and there's no apostrophe to it, just kaysreportcard.com. As far as Social Security is concerned, a very simple way to make it solvent for as long as there's a planet Earth, and that is just take off the cap. What is it, $117,000 now? Once you hit that point, you don't pay anything on any income above that. So if you make steal $5 million a year, if you steal that much because you're in the financial services industry, you're going to pay exactly the same amount of FICA tax, Social Security tax, as someone who makes $117,000. That's not real fair, is it? I don't think so. Now, taking off from what Kay wrote a couple of weeks ago in today's New York Times, little article about Cablevision. And the header said, at Cablevision, Norma Ray has been escorted outside. Remember Norma Ray? Remember the movie, The Union Organizer, over in South Carolina, Norma Ray? As the Times reports, Cablevision, the company, takes pride in its open-door policy for its employees, right? So 2 weeks ago, a little band of cable television installers gathered at a company a depot in Canarsie, Brooklyn, to pick up route sheets and put ladders and tools in their vans. And then they trooped inside to ask a vice president for a few minutes of his time. Now, last winter, these workers overcame fierce management opposition and voted to join the Communications Workers of America. And they wound up spending 9 months in difficult contract talks. So on this particular day, 2 weeks ago, they wanted to ask the vice president at Cablevision if Cablevision was serious about a contract agreement or if Cablevision just wanted to break their union. They waited for 20 minutes to talk, and then they waited 20 more. Lakeisha Johnson, who's 44, got a bit restless and walked into the front office. A manager told her to go back outside. Then the vice president walked in and asked essentially, "Who's supposed to be working now?" Every worker, 22 in all, raised a hand. "Ladies and gentlemen," the vice president said, according to multiple accounts, "I'm sorry to tell you that you've all been permanently replaced." Miss Johnson says, "I said, what? Replaced? You just fired us? You don't even know what we want." Miss Johnson says the vice president looked at her and stated, "I don't care what you want." Now, as the Times points out, unions are in the right now in the definition of an existential crisis. Michigan, the cradle of labor, recently passed a law curtailing union power. New York is Democratic Party blue, but the percentage of private sector employees who are union members has dwindled into the single digits. Right? Now, Cablevision workers are not impoverished, but neither are they paid as well as their unionized brethren at, say, Verizon. Cablevision insists that it pays an industry standard, but it notes no union company is the standard. So the writer asked a company spokesman about the firing of these 22 workers, and the guy said 22 employees refused to go to work after multiple requests to do so. The workers, the writer noted for the Times, all said they intended to work that day. So the Cablevision spokesman repeated his original statement. He also said that Cablevision negotiated in good faith. Then he says, "That leaves us with the issue of your conflict. You ready?" And the writer said, "Sure." "You," the Cablevision guy said, "you're a vice chairman of a Communications Workers of America union." Now, the writer of this article is Michael Powell. Michael writes, "He got me, sort of, like most reporters at the New York Times. I'm a member of the Newspaper Guild, which is part of the Communication Workers of America, which has about 140,000 members in the Northeast. I receive no union pay, and I have no duties. I'm also a Knicks season ticket holder and a Cablevision cable customer. I pay far more to Cablevision companies than I pay to my union in dues." But having said that, back to Michael's story. Miss Johnson feels guilty that she persuaded her colleagues to risk being fired. She speaks of waking up in the middle of the night. She talks about her bills piling up. Her husband is a freelancer. They depend on her health benefits. She says, "It's stressful. The air in our house is getting very thick." A city council speaker in New York, Christine Quinn, who, by the way, wants to be the next mayor of New York, she notes that Cablevision holds an exclusive franchise in the city, and she plans to hold hearings on these firings. But the bad news piles up for these workers. Last week, some Cablevision workers filed for a vote to decertify the union. Boy, talk about the Stockholm Syndrome, right? And Miss Johnson, she says, "Sometimes I break down and I ask myself if I've been selfish. But my husband reminds me, you have a home family and a work family, and you've got to be loyal to both." the assault just continues, doesn't it?